retailers have a problem. And no, I'm not talking about inflation or shrinkage or self-checkout lines. Retailers have a return problem.
There was about $5 trillion worth of retail sales last year. 14.5% of those were returned. That is huge, $743 billion worth.
You might have heard some retailers are changing return policies, shrinking return windows, limiting the types of items that can be returned, even charging for returns in some cases. In fact, 81% of retailers implemented pay-to-return policies in some capacity in 2023.
Amazon, Macy's, and others have added fees, or they've shortened the window for returning items purchased online.
Return fraud has caused a number of retailers to tighten their return policies writ large.
Now, most people assume these crackdowns have to do with fraudulent returns or return scams, and they do, to an extent.
Retailers expect 16.5% of holiday returns to be fraudulent this year. That's $24.5 billion worth.
The reality is, returns have always been a drag on the bottom line, and the advent of e-commerce accelerated the issue as retailers started absorbing the cost of postage, transit, and lost items. It's no wonder big box companies are starting to change their policies, making it harder for fraudsters and cutting down on the cost of returns across the board.
You change a little bit of some of your policies on returns on when you actually refund people, and you try to make sure you got the right product before you actually authorize the refund.
But what if I told you this is just the latest effort in cracking down on return losses? What if retailers have been quietly tracking your return behavior for years? First, let's establish what fraudulent return behavior is.
You have a lot of customers who will send back a broken product or try and defraud the retailer by sending back something else in the box.
Now, those are pretty easy examples, and often those returners know they're engaging in fraudulent behavior, but there's also times when people take advantage of return policies. Things like wardrobing, where a shopper buys a clothing item for an event with the intent of returning it after. While you may be following the basics of a return policy, retailers view this as problematic behavior.
But it's the people who are misinterpreting or not following the intent of policies that are really problematic for retailers.
Now, if you're still thinking, I'm not a fraudulent returner, I always follow the rules. This obviously doesn't apply to me. Sure, maybe not, but that doesn't mean you haven't been flagged in the past.
It isn't sort of a binary event. It isn't that either you're a good returner or a bad returner. Essentially, what retailers are trying to do is ensure that every customer is profitable on their own.
A 2018 report by the Wall Street Journal documented what was and still is a largely unspoken policy of big box retailers, tracking and profiling risky return behavior, even going as far as banning customers from returning at the store. Customers who seemingly have done nothing wrong because of their return score. But what's a return score? Who's keeping track and what do they know about me? Let's use an example. Say I went into my local big box tech store and bought a laptop last year. I take it home and decide, this isn't for me. I'm going to return it. So I go back to the store and return the item within the proper time period. I have my receipt, it's in the original packaging. But this is a pretty expensive item, so I'm asked to show an ID. Hey, no big deal. I give them my ID and the card I made the purchase with. All good. I get my money back and leave the store. Fast forward to today. I go to buy a flat screen TV at that same big box store, but I get it home and it isn't the right size. You know what? I'm just going to order it online. So I go back to that big box store and return the TV within the proper time frame. I have my receipt, it's in the packaging, and wait, what do you mean I can't return it? I'm following company return policy, aren't I? I'm then handed a sheet that tells me I need to reach out to a third-party company to find out why my return was refused. Turns out this store has been sending my data out to a third-party loss prevention service provider, and unbeknownst to me, this company has been building a profile on me for years. They have access to my name, address, phone number, ID number, even my loyalty account information. Basically any personal data I've handed over to this retailer. Now, this is all hypothetical, but loss prevention companies and this exact practice is very real. The most prominent being a company called the Retail Equation. According to the Retail Equation's website, it works with individual retailers to outline what the retailer deems as potentially fraudulent behavior. From there, the Retail Equation software tracks customer return behavior and assigns a score to returners who may exhibit potentially fraudulent behavior. According to the Retail Equation, its software normally tracks factors such as frequency of the specific transaction types, transaction value, whether the customer has a receipt, and purchase history at that retailer. But what does that look like in practice? Well, according to the Wall Street Journal, it could be a lot of things. Bringing back several returns in a short amount of time, returning a large portion of your purchase. Maybe you forgot a receipt, returning an expensive item, returning a frequently stolen item, even returning an item close to closing time. These are just a few examples of things that could hurt your return score. Meaning, in theory, even a shopper who is operating within the bounds of a return policy could get penalized. For some, they may never know they even had a score or that it was impacted. For others, this could look like a warning handed out at the return counter or being outright banned from returning at that retailer. According to customer complaints lodged with the Better Business Bureau, customers reported feeling blindsided by the return blocks at major U.S. retailers. Several complaints go as far as claiming the penalized behavior in the report was misreported, and they had no way of seeing it until after they were given a warning or their return was already blocked. It's complaints like these that prompted several now dismissed class action lawsuits against the retail equation between 2020 and 2023. Plaintiffs in each suit allege this software often gets information wrong and gives shoppers little recourse when it comes to accessing or correcting the data the retail equation collects. The lawsuit goes on to claim that this data is supplied to the retail equation without the knowledge or consent of consumers. The problem is these types of complaints are hard to back up. Often these policies are outlined where most of the fine print is buried, in retailers' terms of service or return policy.
It isn't something you can opt out of, because if they have decided to outsource their return logistics to a third party, and you're agreeing to purchase from them in that purchase agreement, you're also implicitly opting into accepting the third-party logistics provider for returns.
At the time of the Wall Street Journal report, the retail equation said it worked with 34,000 stores. The 2021 class action suit named several retailers as defendants, including Dick's Sporting Goods, Best Buy, and Advanced Auto Parts. Other retailers like Home Depot and TJ Maxx have also been identified as past users of the retail equation services. And this leads back to our bigger question. If retailers have been implementing these targeted policies for a while, why implement broad policy changes now?
Now that interest rates have also risen, what you have is retailers thinking, look, there's a piece of cost here that isn't necessary.
Basically, it's a lot more expensive to be a retailer right now, meaning to turn a profit, they're having to tamp down on areas that have historically been money drains. According to the retail equation's own numbers, the U.S. retail industry lost over $101 billion to return fraud and abuse in 2023. And that's not counting the cost of all the regular, non-fraudulent returns.
Most of the returns that come back, it could cost up to 40% of the retail or the original retail price to put that item back on the shelf. And there's no guarantee they can sell it for what they originally asked for it. So they're losing money on both ends.